Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Crystal Earth podcast. My name is Monet Noctaris, also known as the Black Rose of Gaia, and welcome back. This is season 2. I was feeling a little extra spooky today. I just gotta show this off here. I have this little, you guys know, purple fluorite is my favorite crystal. Why I'm purple everything. I have this little purple fluorite bat. Makes me really happy. This little purple fluorite bat necklace. I decided to change out my septum ring to do a little spider web. Not sure how I feel about it yet. So, might swap it out later, but 'tis the season, as they say. The season of the witch. Anyway, oh yeah, I also have my little, I don't know if you can see them, my little spiders too. So I had to complete the look. So today I am going to be talking about an extra feature that those of us who are crystalline beings have that helps determine kind of how we were designed to interface with the grid and others around us and the natural world, which is our crystalline architecture. So I'm going to get into that. I'm also going to give you some examples of like what crystalline architecture can look like and tell you a bit about my own so that you have some context for that, some examples. I call them my bells and whistles. But first, I just want to give you a little bit of a planetary update. Oh, I just realized I have another purple fluorite. I don't know if I've showed you guys this one yet. This one's but I have to now. So this one's a lavender purple fluorite. It's actually, this one's really special to me. And it ties into all this crystalline architecture stuff. And it's a little bit beat up. It's got some chunks missing out of it, but it's well loved. That's for sure. So yeah, so a little grid update here. For those of you who are following along in real time, some of you are, I know that, and some of you will find this later after all of this has already completed. But I've mentioned before that we're in the kind of final stages of the override sequence, which for me is just, it's hard to believe. It's been a crazy year. Like so much has happened. If I think back to what I was doing a year ago, like this stuff was just getting started in earnest. So that's kind of wild, but a lot has happened in a pretty short period of time, even though it was thousands of years in the making. So I talked a bit about last week. I actually recorded that one on September 29th, the first episode of season 2, where I talked about the masculine and feminine lattices within the grid, how the feminine lattice is currently on and it's stabilized and it's broadcasting. So the masculine lattice, it's been built. The old one was torn down, destroyed, the scaffolding removed. The new masculine lattice rebuilt so that it can actually conduct energy the way it's supposed to and help route into masculine coded beings the way it was designed to. And just in case this is like the first thing you've watched and you don't know what I'm talking about, when I refer to the override, what I mean is the great planetary reboot, restoring balance, restoring Gaia's original crystalline blueprint, the original codes of creation, Gaia's original song, and the grid as it was designed to be. We are repairing, overhauling, rebooting, and we're reaching the end of this whole sequence. So where we're at now, since about a week and a half has passed, almost 2 weeks now since I've recorded that episode, is the grid is in a settling and entraining phase. So it's kind of like the sprinkler system. It's been turned on because it's broadcasting primarily through the feminine grid right now, which is kind of like a soft, gentle entrainment that the collective is not likely to consciously notice. But if you're looking, you can see the signs. It looks like people beginning to wake up in greater numbers, wake up to their higher selves, their higher purpose, even past lives, things like that. I'm hearing that feedback from the field. I'm having people come out of nowhere being like, oh, my mom or my sister or my daughter, who I never thought was going to ever go through an awakening, is awakening right now. And, it's kind of like the baseline is shifting in the collective quietly. because in this phase, so it's like the grid is turned on right now. It's just not powered up all the way fully because it has to happen in a gentle way so that the collective isn't destabilized and for the next sequences to lock in. So you can kind of think of it like instead of a light, what are those called? Like there's one on my wall. Light switch, that's the word I'm looking for. It's not like a light switch flip. It's more of like a dimmer switch that's like slowly being turned up. And then eventually, once we reach a certain tipping point, it'll get turned up all the way and begin broadcasting fully. So when that happens, that's when the masculine lattice will start broadcasting. I'm not going to give like a forecast because it does keep shifting, but right now, we're looking at maybe sometime the second half of this month for that to begin. And that's really when that happens, and then the seal happens, which it's called the crown seal. That's like the capstone of the grid gets placed. And that's looking like it may happen sometime this fall. So what you can expect from that is it kind of directly coincides with what we were talking about last time, which is the masculine lattice. Once they flip the switch on my counterpart, who's the masculine keystone, that will trigger the masculine lattice to start running current. And so that's when we're likely to see a lot of masculine coded beings begin to rise, begin to have courage, begin to have spine. And that's actually directly tied into my counterpart's crystalline architecture, which is the topic today, what crystalline architecture is and who has it and what the purpose is. So let's jump in. So if you've listened to previous episodes, you've heard me talk about crystalline beings. A crystalline being is a person who incarnated here for this next part, for crystal earth. And oftentimes for this threshold in general, those of us who are coded to interface with the grid and stabilize or harmonize the grid, if you are one of those people, you may begin feeling your crystalline architecture come online. Of course, there are also people who are coded for what comes after the override is complete and we start building what comes next, building crystal earth, the new systems, the new technology, human and earth friendly systems to replace the institutions that are visibly cracking right now. You know, that's part of the collapse. Like I said, you can't really build on something broken. You got to tear it down first. So we're kind of seeing that collapse happen in real time. And we'll see it especially more as once the masculine lattice fires up. Because a lot of the institutions and leaders, especially who are breaking, are masculine coded ones. So that'll be fun. But if you're like me, you're like, I'm here for it. Like I incarnated for this. So let's just like get the show on the road here and so that we can get to the other side. Anyway, you know, as a crystalline being, I'm primarily human. I have a beating human heart. I have a human body, mostly, but that's a story for another day. You know, it's like we, as crystalline beings, we are human. We have human cells. But we also have what you can kind of think of as like an extra overlay. When I was in school, this will give you a clue how long that was ago. We still used those like overhead projectors. I think that's what they're called, where it's got the light and then you can put down a slide. So then you can put an overlay on top of it, right? Where you can kind of like write on that one or whatever, and it'll show through both layers. Does that make sense? So you can think of our crystalline system, our crystalline architecture as a crystalline being is it's almost like just adding an extra layer that you can't see it with your eyes. You know, you wouldn't look at me and see all the shit they crammed into me for mine because I got a lot. I got a lot more than the average bear, but you're not going to like be able to perceive it with the human eye. But it doesn't mean it's not there. Just like an aura or an energy field, right? That's like another layer on top. You can't necessarily see it. Most people can't see energy in that way or energy fields. Some can, but you know, that's not that common. But it doesn't mean it's not there because as humans, we're holographic, meaning that we have so many layers that you can't even see. Right? We have the physical body, We have the emotional body, the etheric body, the energy body, the crystalline body. I mean, like you can go on, basically. And it's like all of that kind of makes up who we are multidimensionally. It's just that what you can see with like the naked eye is really the physical body, but you can still maybe tune in, like somebody like an empath, right? If you're an empath, you might be able to feel somebody's emotional body, right? It's there. You're feeling it in your own body and interfacing with it. You just can't see it. So that's kind of how crystalline architecture is. And so all of us who are crystalline beings, right? And there's a lot of us here on Earth currently who are here for the next part. Our crystalline architecture was very thoughtfully designed with love by beings that have been guiding us since before we came here. And our crystalline architecture is what dictates our function within the grid, within the Earth. So, for example, there's kind of a few different categories that I see in people. I see people who are stabilizers. Their architecture is going to help stabilize those around them. It could be like somebody who walks into the room and everybody just feels a little bit more calm. That might be someone who's like a stabilizer, and their own architecture informs that and supports that role. You could be a harmonizer. A harmonizer is someone who brings discordant energy into harmony. So it could look like, maybe if we're going to use the walking into a room analogy, they might walk into a room and say there's like an intense discussion happening between two groups. That person's presence might harmonize the environment so that discussions can happen without conflict, for example. Another type of person is an amplifier. An amplifier is somebody who basically brings in energy and amplifies it back outward with their crystalline system. So those are kind of like the broader categories. And it's not just that we're working with energy in human systems. That might be part of it. But you could also be working with energy in the natural world. So you could be stabilizing, amplifying, or harmonizing earth energy, cosmic energy, elemental energy. And it's like that's what makes you kind of serve as a walking, living, breathing crystalline node in the grid, because the grid is interfacing with you in that way. So those are some of the main, like, bigger categories. But within that, all of us who are crystalline coded, we have other interesting bells and whistles. So I want to tell you a little bit about some examples of what this can actually look like in a person, and also how you might be able to tell if it's coming online for yourself. So most of the time, I'll see somebody's crystalline architecture somewhere in their, what you might call a body grid. So, we have the chakra systems. I think that's pretty mainstream at this point. You can just think of that as just, it's just really your energy centers along your midline, right? And so usually I will see crystalline architecture kind of along those spots in a person's body, an energy field. But also, I often see them in hands, sometimes feet. A lot of times it'll be like a dual interface, or there'll be a few things going on that they all kind of like interact with each other in different ways. Like right before this, I was doing an attunement session with someone who is a crystalline being. It was like the first thing when I zoomed in was I saw all these different kind of pieces that were working together. And if you're a crystalline being, you're already partially activated, most likely, just because that's where we're at within the override sequence. But all of your systems may not be fully online. So they might be partially online. And then at some point, it's like when the timing's right, is like we're able to kind of turn the key on it, and then it lights up and its full function lights up. Because, for example, my crystalline architecture, like the main system came online all at once, but then I've had different pieces that will turn on when they're needed and then kind of go dormant when they're not needed, depending on what they're function is. So I think I'll actually tell you now about my own system so I can give you some concrete examples. So this is something that I didn't know I had until I had it, until it got turned on and all the way up. My understanding is that I think I was probably the first crystalline being to have their architecture, what I call booted up. When it happened, it was not gentle. Everybody since me that I have worked with when we've done any booting up together of their systems, it's been quite gentle. But for me, it was it was wild. I'll tell you a little story time here. So I think in order to like put it into perspective, I have to tell you what life was like before my architecture came online, because this is important because for a lot of us who have this built-in crystalline blueprint and system, if it's not on, it can feel like we're literally missing something. Like we are not functioning how we were designed to function if you're crystalline. So, one of the main ways that my architecture is designed and impacts me is through my brain. Because the way I was designed was like, I have this like ultra powerful brain, but before it was on, I was riding the struggle bus like every damn day. So before, I was really struggling cognitively. I had gone through this period where some of my like psychic abilities, I guess, were starting to open up. I had this like activation that happened during a plant medicine journey. So all of a sudden I was it was like the channeling abilities that I always knew I was supposed to have kind of got switched on. In between that and then the next several months, I entered a period where living as a human was really, really, really difficult. My understanding is that my brain was like kind of slowly over time changing so that once my architecture came online, it could function and it could fire the way it was supposed to. And as that was happening, it really felt like one of the big issues was my neurodivergence just was on fire. I really struggled a lot with sequences, for example, which, if you have ADHD or autism or suspect you might be on the spectrum, like you may have a hard time with sequences in general because our executive function when we're neurodivergent, and this is just a really common marker of a crystalline being, is being neurodivergent. Our brains are wired differently. We're wired for what comes next, not for what's already happened in our lives. So for me, it was like my executive function just ended up being gone. Like I think of executive function as like an air traffic controller, right? It's like the air traffic controllers on the ground and it's telling the planes where to land in what order on what runway, kind of, right? So with most people, that air traffic controller is there and present, right? But for me, my whole life, I never felt like I had one. Or maybe they were like really lazy, like they didn't really know what they were doing. Like they took a lot of breaks. But as I got closer to being booted up, like it was like they were just gone. And it was like the air traffic increased and the controller got fired. So I was just dealing with constant overwhelm. Sequences were just so brutal. Something as simple as like, I'm getting ready for bed. That might take a typical person 5 minutes. But for me, the amount of cognitive energy expenditure it took for me to be able to like remember the sequence in the correct order, like without getting lost somewhere in the middle, was like literally painful. It also ties into working memory. A lot of folks who are neurodivergent, our working memory is not very good. The way I think of it is like the speed of our brain moves faster than its ability to log memory as it goes. So if it's like an assembly line or something, it's like the person who's in the front, who's making the thing, is like going really fast and efficiently, and all the stuff's going down the line. But the person then who's in charge of like putting the things in the boxes is getting overwhelmed and has to like put shit on the floor because it's just happening too much. I don't know if that makes any sense. It makes sense to me, but it's like your brain is moving so fast that your memory can't keep up with what's going on in real time and can't log it quick enough. So that's what I experienced, to where my working memory was so poor that, if I'm using the getting ready for bed example, it's like, okay, I've got to collect these like 5 things. I need my eye mask, I need my chapstick, I need my water, I need to put on my pajamas, I gotta and I gotta lock the doors, like all these different things. And then it would be like I have to use all of my energy to remembering what all I need to do and in what order. And then at some point, inevitably, I would forget where I am, what I've done, and then I would have put my chapstick or my eye mask or whatever, lost it somewhere. So then it's like, okay, now I have to start over. And then I'd be like, well, what was I lost something. What was I looking for? And it was just literally, it was like disabling. It was so bad. It was so bad because my brain was changing to prepare for my crystalline architecture for being turned on. But I didn't know that. I correlated it with my channeling abilities opening up, where I was like, well, I'm expanding psychically, spiritually, and now my brain's shifting in a response to that. And I guess that's just what I signed up for. And it's always going to be that way. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me because I literally thought, like, this is just how it's going to be the rest of my life. As I'm like circling my house, taking 30 minutes to get ready for bed, trying to remember what I forgot. It was really disheartening. And I was really sad. Um, and so then what happened next was a complete, just total shock and surprise. Had no idea this was coming. To me, this is when, the mission that I knew I was a part of, um, went from like, wouldn't it be cool if this was actually real, to like, yeah, this is real. This is undeniable. So I was shortly after, maybe a couple months after I met my counterpart, who I talked about in the last episode. And he came over to my house. We're just kind of doing normal stuff. We were sitting and watching YouTube. Um, he was like, have you ever seen the videos of um Cher when she called into C-SPAN? I guess it was back in, I don't know when this was, but she used to call C-SPAN, and give her opinions. And so I was like, no, I haven't seen this. We should watch it. So we're sitting there on the couch watching Cher call into C-SPAN. And the host is like talking to her. It's really funny. You should look it up. Host is talking to her, doesn't know who it is. And she's like giving her opinion on something. I don't remember what on. And you see the wheels turning in his brain. And he's like, is this Cher? It was really funny. It's pretty funny. And then he realizes he's talking to Cher. It's a whole thing. And so then that kind of turned into then just watching like old footage of Cher performing from the 70s on variety shows. And so I'm just sitting there watching that with him and eating pizza and just doing totally normal human shit. And all of a sudden it was like this current just began running up through me and down through me. I don't know if it went up or down. I guess it must have gone down. And it was just kind of like a sustained, I'm like, it's not a lightning strike, because that's like a one-time thing. But it was like an electrical current was running through me. Because I had a hard boot up. They had to like hard turn me on because the grid wasn't running at full capacity yet. It was still kind of the broken system. It was only partially functioning. So they had to kind of be creative with it. So I felt that just like running, it stopped me in my fucking tracks. They were going through this whole sequence where they were literally powering me up, all of my dormant stuff that I didn't know I had. And the whole thing for me, it was insane. The whole thing lasted like an hour, maybe. And they had to like test out a bunch of different functions for me. I have some funny stories from that. I don't know if the world's ready for them yet. I'll save that for later. Help the testing mode. By the end of it, it was like all of a sudden everything in my brain just went quiet. I didn't realize how loud my brain was until it was silent. It was like just extreme static for I don't know how long. I mean, it had definitely been ramping up the static. I just thought it was like part of my ADHD where it was like literally having six thoughts at once all the time. It got more intense the closer I got to my boot up. But I know my whole life, it always felt like that. I always felt like I had to escape my own brain. It was like the only times where I could was like when I was sleeping, when I was blacked out. That was in my college years when I was trying to just like get everything to just be quiet. I don't recommend or endorse that. Not exactly productive. Or during sex. Like those are the only times when my brain could like stop for a second. I think that's also kind of how I got into like the kink world and stuff pretty hard around that time because you know, I was really seeking outlets to be able to just turn off all of the noise. And that had just been getting more and more intense. It was harder for me to hold conversations. It was harder for me to have like sentences that completed. And you'll hear it too from that time. If you go back to my old podcasts, like you'll hear varying stages of my brain where it's like there's times where I just say 5 words and then my brain goes into the next sentence and then my brain goes into the next sentence, then my brain goes into the next sentence. And it's like nothing connects because the way that my brain was functioning. And I'm telling you this because many of you may feel this way. This is something, maybe not as extreme as me, but for those of us who are neurodivergent, it's like there's a reason. I know there certainly was for me. I'm not saying that everything is tied into the grid or being a crystalline being, but it's possible that a lot of it is. So that's why I'm kind of just trying to be a mirror of what you may be experiencing too, or have experienced in the past. So anyway, after my crystalline architecture got fully turned on and powered up, I was like, there's no background noise. I'm not having competing thoughts. It was just like everything was clear. It happened at night. And then the next thing was to go to sleep and do my bedtime routine. And I will always remember this. It was like, well, this was really weird, actually. My working memory, because you know how I mentioned I had the working memory issues? It was like there was a clear delineation from before I got booted up to like after, to where all of a sudden my working memory was working, but I couldn't access the old memories that weren't recording from before. So like that evening I was like, it's like, where is half my shit? Like I couldn't find anything. I realized just how much of my working memory was not being logged or filed. It was like my memory banks were empty for like all the shit I needed. I'm like, no wonder I couldn't find anything ever because my brain wasn't recording memories in real time, like half the time, which is kind of scary. But that was weird, very weird, because I was like everything from after the moment I got booted up, I was recording memory normally and properly. So that was just really, really weird and interesting. And just like, oh my God, like this is life changing. This is absolutely life changing for me. So the next morning, I had I actually had a meeting with my group, my Earth Keepers group. They must have thought I was on weed because my energy was like, oof, it was crazy. And it was like for the first time I could form sentences that worked. My brain was working the way it was designed to work. And it was such a huge contrast. I remember before the meeting, I was like, I'm gonna wash my hair. I hate washing my hair. I have a lot of hair and it's curly and it's a pain in the ass. And sequences were always really, really hard for me. So it was like, washing my hair was the thing that I just dreaded and avoided if I could help it. But this time it was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I didn't have to like cognitively think through and remember every single step and figure out, it was like the air traffic controller was there and it had never been there. And I was like, it took me like 7 minutes, normally something that would be extremely overwhelming for me because of the amount of steps it takes, both to wash the hair, to do the shower, and then to have to like put the product in it and do the things after, like totally overwhelming. For the first time, it was something that simple wasn't overwhelming for me. So that was when I realized like my brain just has never been functioning the way it was meant to. And then, the other big thing for me that happened immediately was my I had been channeling. Those abilities were happening, but it took a lot of mental strain and energetic strain to be able to go into the field. It was like having to like go in and project myself out and pull information in. And it might take me like 3 hours with a client to get the information I needed with them, and then the rest of the day I would have like a big headache because of the amount of energy I had to spend. It was painful. Even if I could do it, it still hurt. But after this, it was like that just became instantaneous to where I'm just getting like feedback in real time. I don't have to go through like 100 steps to like get the energetic space perfect and enter the field and retrieve the information. And, it was just like now all of a sudden it's just like a channel had been turned on that wasn't there before. And I could just tune in to, as I'm talking to somebody in real time, I could just kind of like turn up the volume or whatever, and information would flow through. And that became kind of like instantaneous. So that was amazing. It was like, oh, finally, like this is what I always knew I was capable of. It was just amazing. It was amazing. So that was like kind of, I would say, the big things that shifted right away when my architecture was turned on. And then over time, and as the mission progressed and eventually turned into the override, once that opened up, all of these things kind of came online in a sequence. And I began to kind of get all these extra interesting bells and whistles that interface directly with the grid. And a lot of these ones are going to be similar to what other crystalline beings might have. Now that I've worked with lots of them, I kind of see similar functions. And like I said, like my story and my architecture, it's pretty extreme. This is not what most people go through. But I was like coded and designed for very specific functions within the grid. So that's just how they made me. Some of the other features that I have that came online are, for example, this one's pretty straightforward. And this is something that I see a lot with other crystalline beings, is having architecture in your hands. What I learned about myself is that my hands have extra kind of energetic abilities, and it connects to my whole system. So like say I'm channeling information downward or upward or whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm doing, depending on the situation. It's like this hand is my receiving hand. It conducts energy inward. So that's why you'll often see me with a crystal in my left hand. Like if I'm doing like a session with somebody or anything really, most of the time I have a crystal in my left hand. That's like the receiving juncture for energy. On my right hand is more, it's funny, as I'm doing that, it's like I can feel it pulsing and reacting to the crystal. On this hand, this is my hand for directing energy. So like if you ever see me do I do energy work a lot. I'll do light language with my hands. I'll do specific lifts or specific what's it called? Directing energy. I might route different types of energy through, whether it be like solar energy or one of the flames like the violet flame. There's all these different flames or different types of energy might come through my hands, right? And source it outward, whether I'm doing energy work on somebody or whether I'm just transmitting. That's a whole other category of crystalline being. A transmitter. I didn't even talk about that. A transmitter. It's kind of like an amplifier, but an amplifier takes what energy is around and amplifies it. A transmitter routes energy down and sends it out. So I'm kind of like a transmitter. That's one of my main functions, if you were to categorize me. So I might be translating, different codes, different types of things. It just kind of flows through me depending on the situation and the purpose. And so that's kind of how the hands work for me. Also, I have architecture that allows me to program crystals with certain frequencies. like I have crystalline, I don't know how it works, something in my hands that allows me to, like, say if I wanted to put a specific frequency in here, say a frequency of, like, let's take like the Lemurian bloom, for example, right? That's like a crystalline field that has a specific frequency. I can take it and I can program the frequency within a crystal because crystals are programmable. And a lot of us are like walking, living crystals. So it's like a crystal programming a crystal. It just makes sense. So that's one of them. But I see this a lot with people where the hands, maybe they don't have the same exact function and they're wired a little bit differently, but it's similar. It's like, it might be both hands that are transmitting. Might be hands that are receiving energy and transmitting it somewhere through the body. Could be like sending energy outward. It's always really interesting to see how different people are designed differently with, like, same equipment, different function. And a lot of this is routed through, if you're wondering like, well, how, a lot of it's routed through the nervous system and through the DNA, because a lot of us have bonus crystalline DNA structures that when our crystalline architecture comes online, that gets just kind of turned up, the DNA that's already there that hasn't been on yet. So I see that. That's pretty common. Like I know of others who are in my group who can like translate different wavelengths of light through their hands, right? Or different flames, different things like that. So hands are a big one. And once you start working with the hands, it's always fun because you can feel it. It just started happening to me kind of intuitively. Um, when certain guides were helping me with that, because certain guides or members of my oversoul, who are my primary incarnations working with me, they have these abilities, and it's like they're showing me how to use them through my own architecture because they're borrowed from these other lifetimes where I've had lifetimes in, for example, Lemuria or Mintaka, or Egypt. So I'm like borrowing my oversoul members' abilities, and they're all kind of coming through me. That's how a lot of this works. So that was the hands. I also have some of my other main stuff. I've got, like, I think the first thing that came online for me that was noticeable was the base of my skull. I call it like a holographic implant, but I don't know that that's like the right word for it. I just don't really have a better word for it. Interface. We'll call it interface. I have an interface, like a crystalline interface at the base of my skull. And it's like in the shape of a triangle, it's purple and gold because I can see it in my inner eye when I tune in. But this one I started noticing because there's a physical symptom attached to it, which is when it's activating, because it activates depending on my environment, what I'm doing, who I'm talking to. I'll feel it like a vibration. It'll feel like my tongue and my teeth are vibrating. When I started noticing that, like the first time I was like, what is this? And I found out, it's like an interface. I mentioned that those of us who are crystalline beings have an inner crystal, usually somewhere too. I have two. I have one that is similar to this, that's like here. And I have one that's kind of more in the high heart. I'll actually show you a picture of it. I have a picture of my aura. I get my aura photographed periodically, and you can see what it looks like in the aura photographs. Let me show you. And I've had a lot of other crystalline beings be photographed by the same aura photographer, same camera, and we all have our inner crystals. You can see them in the picture in a different spot. It's wild. So you'll be able to see mine. So this is crazy. Okay, so you'll see crystalline architecture in action here. Okay, this is that like good tangible stuff. This good data. Okay, so this photo was taken right after my crystalline activation. I hadn't been booted up yet, but my crystalline activation had already happened where my body, I have a whole story that goes along with that. Maybe I'll tell it sometime. So you can see there's a picture of me. You can see my one inner crystal, my other inner crystal. But this is interesting. This whole area is kind of blank. That area was blank. And then there's some stuff going on up here. But my aura is primarily indigo. So then things got interesting. This is the second picture I took. I actually took it at the same time as my counterpart. He was right next to me when it happened. So I don't know if that's partly why it looked this way. So this is my second picture. These are actually, like, you can see my guides in this one. Like, this is Markara and this is Corellith. This is my Arcturian guide. You can kind of see that expressed in the energy itself. And then you can see both crystals here. And this was right after I got booted up. This was maybe a couple weeks after I got booted up. Look at the difference. Pre-boot up, post-boot up. Now it gets really interesting. This is my most recent one. This was taken a month or so ago. A lot has happened in my energy field and system since this one, since right after boot up. See the shift. And all that like light, see all the like white light and stuff. Look, so I wish I could show you. I have another picture I'd love to compare this to. But you can see, the inner crystals are just super bright. So, energy fields shift as our crystalline architecture comes online. It's fascinating. And I've seen this with other people too, who have similar architecture, who we've taken pictures, along the way. So I have two inner crystals. You can see them super clearly. And I was told that like before I got the pictures taken, and then by my team. So it was just really interesting to see it tangibly, in a photo. Inner crystals as part of the architecture, and they usually serve a purpose. One of mine serves as is my connection to Gaia's crystalline heart, because that's part of my function. I am Gaia's crystalline heart. That's my direct connection to Gaia's crystalline body. If you're a crystalline being, if you have an inner crystal somewhere in your field, it could have a totally different function. And that's something where when I'm talking to a crystalline being, I can see their crystal and tell them what it is. It's just a fun. That's like one of my as one of my bells and whistles, one of my party tricks, which is a cool ability. I've also got some other like random bits of architecture that aren't random at all. For example, I have 3 stargates within my body. I have one in my throat. I see a lot of folks who have like either if they're a singer, they're a public speaker, maybe they use their voice, and that's like important to their own crystalline blueprint. They might have some sort of interface in their throat chakra center. So like for me, it has to do with singing. I have a stargate in my throat chakra that it helps me interface with vaults and open vaults with my voice because they respond to my tone through here. I have a stargate in my heart center, and that's a long story that I don't need to go into. It's a long fucking story. But that one had a very specific function. I don't know if it'll be used again. But at a certain point in right before the override kicked off, it had a function when we had to transfer the Atlantis crystal to the Orion Stargate. That's a long story. Go to my old podcast for that one. And then I also have one in my sacral. That's an even wilder story about what that one was used for. But that one was used to seed the bloom into the aquifer system. A long story, which the bloom is like when I talk about the bloom or the Atlantis crystal, like those are specific keystone crystalline frequencies that make up some of the primary frequencies within Earth's crystalline grid. The bloom being Lemuria's crystalline field that was seeded from Mintaka. That's a long story. I'm doing a series on this, actually, the crystalline lineage series. I'm going to get more into all of that and it's a workshop series that you can actually sign up for on my website, monetnoctaris.com, where you can learn more about these and experience those frequencies directly. See, this is why I have crystalline architecture, so I can help transmit some of these crystalline frequencies to other people to experience them. That's just how they made me. Sometimes I'll also see, it'll be like you have some sort of energetic tool or technology that's built in. For example, I've seen this with myself and others as well, where those of us who work with solar energy, we might have like an Ankh type of a situation within our architecture that helps us conduct energy upward, solar energy upward into our energy system to transmit that energy. And it just is really, really unique to each person. Each crystalline being has a different purpose. And so it's really, really interesting for me when I tap into somebody's field and I'm able to see the different pieces. I have quite a few other things. Some of them are not being used right now. Some of them are used more than others. But it's almost like it's like our superpowers, right? As crystalline people. That's how they're stored. And for most of us, it's been dormant our whole life. But now that the grid is beginning to resonate, is beginning to be turned up, some of that architecture is coming online itself. So this was important. This is why I wanted to talk about this, because I actually had I had somebody reach out to me on Instagram who had a question about this. Now that the grid, if it's like the dimmer switch is being turned up, it's like the crystalline systems within us are reacting to it and interfacing with it automatically. And so in those cases, it's like you may be hearing things. Oh, yeah. I almost forgot. I almost forgot about one of my other ones. I have interfaces in my ears as well. Think of them, it's almost like a holographic earpiece. I don't know. So I hear tones. Like when a grid is syncing with me, I'll hear, depending on if it's outgoing or incoming, I'll hear a tone in this ear or I'll hear a tone in this ear. And it's kind of like that little signal that, like, okay, syncing with you. So, I've had people say, like, oh, I'm here, it's like I have tinnitus. I'm hearing things lately, like buzzing or tones, but it's actually, it might not be that. And it's not, I wouldn't call it ascension symptoms. I don't love that term, ascension symptoms, because we're not ascending, we're descending. We're bringing these frequencies into our human bodies, right? We're not leaving Earth. So, you might be hearing tones or buzzing or different things in your ears. You might be feeling vibrations in your chest or in your face, just like I mentioned, with my teeth. when my when this one's working, you might be feeling tingling in your hands. You might be feeling, if it's in your lower body, if you have architecture in your lower body, you might be feeling things in your womb space. If you have those parts, you may be, it depends on what you got going on in there and why. So much of that is coming online. It's like warming up now because it's reacting to the environment, to the grid. You might also feel it more if you're like near a node or a vault in the grid or an area with a lot of crystalline activity. Or if you're in water, like that's a big one too, because water is crystalline, is a big conductor of this energy and interfaces with it a lot, especially right now. So I wanted to let you know because you might be feeling it. You might be feeling it already. And there's nothing you necessarily need to do unless if you feel like there's more and you want to understand it better. That's something that I do. You can book an attunement session with me on my website, which I'll link to, where we actually go in, and sometimes a guide will come forward and be like, here, it's time to place the key inside the lock to this specific bit of architecture, whatever it is, whatever purpose it is, so that it can get turned on and powered up. So if you're feeling that, like nudge, like there's something that I'm meant to do here, just follow that nudge. You're welcome to come find me and we can definitely turn on your architecture. Or if we just want to know what yours is, if you highly suspect you're a crystalline being. And that's something where it's like, just, you'll know that inside, right? So you're welcome to come work with me and we'll we'll figure it all out together. I do a lot of like system scanning and tuning if need be, in like with the help of your guides who join us to help. So I think that's kind of all I wanted to say about crystalline architecture. We're all here to embody a specific crystalline blueprint. If you're a crystalline being, you can just kind of trust that, like, what you're feeling or what you're experiencing is actually you coming home to yourself, to your true self, your true design. And just like, when I had my own boot up, even though it was kind of crazy, it was like the peace that I felt afterwards of being like, oh my gosh, I finally feel at home in my own brain. That was the biggest piece for me. And it can really, for some of us, give a lot of relief, especially if we have a dormant piece that once it's online, it's like, it feels night and day different depending on how you were designed. So all I wanted to say about that. Go to my website, monetnoctaris.com, to see what I'm doing currently. Would love to see you for my Crystalline Lineage series. And also go find me on Instagram. I'm doing a lot of Q&As on there and answering people's questions. So find me in my stories. That's where I hang out mostly. And I think that's it for now. It's complete. Bye.